Great books, great contents, great videos, great YouTube videos selection, great books selection makes your knowledge great. Great writings, great dissertations, any kind of great publications, including any other, all kinds of books, academic books, any kinds of papers, publications, great writings in aggregate. Great writings makes your knowledge great and your imagination supersede, okay? Accelerate. Great books make your knowledge great. Eccentric and egregious questions. The bizarre and myriad labyrinth questions from the core and basic elements of existence to connect their single and slight dots to make more diverse and denser connections. That is the development of knowledge. The man computer who makes the strange questions makes the advancement from that by trying to answer on that, which makes an experiment and shoot by that. We frequently adjust our daily behaviors, the ways in which we interact with each other, develop relations, and perform jobs based on the introduction of ever-evolving technologies. Some experts argue that we have not yet adapted to an environment that is. Some experts argue that we have not yet adapted to an environment that is and will continue to be a moving target. The New York Times journalist Matt Ritchell documents the gap between the pace of innovation and the pace of evolution of human, arguing that human beings need to learn to adapt to technology in a world that is changing way faster than we can evolve. Um, as this thing to learn to adapt technology. Rachel analogizes our experience with the technology with the way we confront junk food, pointing out that just as we have not changed the past that food has industrialized, so we don't metabolize junk food any better than we did 50 years ago. The difference, according to Rachel, is that we have learned that we must be careful with junk food and limit its consumption. We have not yet learned to deal with the new inventions from the past to match with the pace for our evolution of our physical and brain body, exposing ourselves to the optional potential consequences emanating from overuse thereof. Frequently adjust our daily behaviors, the ways in which we interact with each other, develop relationships, and perform jobs based on the introduction of ever evolving technologies, and some experts argue that we have not yet adapted to an environment that is and will continue to be a moving target. The New York Times journalist Matt Ritchell documents the gap between the pace of innovation and the pace of evolution, arguing that human beings need to learn to adapt to technology in a world that is changing way faster than we can evolve. Rachel analogizes our experience with technology with the way we confront junk food, pointing out that just as we have not changed at the pace that food has industrialized, so we don't metabolize junk food any better than we did 50 years ago. The difference, according to Rachel, is that we have learned that we must be careful with junk food and limit its consumption. We have not yet learned to adapt to correctly metabolize the junk food what we corrected 50 years ago, since uh, from the time the food industry has ever evolving with the duration of 50 times of development, but we had as ourselves like a physical body, we haven't yet evolved to match with the pace of development with the food, exposing ourselves to the potential consequences emanating from the overuse thereof. So if you read a book but cannot analyze what the written word means into your real information by the experience, you cannot understand, even though you see a certain word. But since you do not know a corresponding real information to interpret about, no, analysis is made by reading it because you cannot know what information does it refer to. So, 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 not about reading a book, but along with your own experience that really corresponds to your real knowledge. The universality of music. The universality of music is perhaps more contentious than that of language because we place greater emphasis on production than listening, with many individuals declaring themselves to be unmusical. In this regard, John Blacking's comments made in the 1970s on the contradiction between theory and practice in the middle-class Western society in which he grew up remain relevant today. Music was remains all around us, and we hear it when we eat and try to talk in restaurants and airport lounges. It is played all day long on the radio. In fact, there are few occasions when someone is not trying to fill the moments of potential sounds with music. Blacking remarked that society claims that only a limited number of people are musical, and yet it behaves as if all possess it, the base capacity without which no musical tradition can exist. Tradition is made by the mass people, like mass production. The capacity to listen and distinguish patterns of sound. He favored the idea that there was no such thing as an unmusical human being and noted that the existence of Bach or a Beethoven was only possible because of the presence of the discriminating audience. Briefly, animal communication systems to be of two sorts. First, birds have a fixed and fairly small repertoire of distinct signals, each of which has a set function, a flight call, alarm call, and the like. A particular environment elicits the appropriate response. Human language does not consist of such a small fixed repertoire of predictable responses. Second, consider bees or bees. Returning from a distant foot towards dance is a message. The positioning of the dance and its parent indicate the direction and distance of the food source. This remarkable efficient system of communication differs from those of birds in having a limited number of signals. The length and the pattern are capable of so many variations. Nevertheless, the bee system is not flexible in the way human language is. Its response is environmentally fixed if you know where the bee has been. And if you know the coding system, you can predict the pattern of the dance. In contrast, if a person comes from a food source, a good restaurant, for example, you cannot break her words, her food description. Indeed, whether she talks about food at all is stimulus dependent. Storing in a accurate 100% of storing, right, consummate, storing a machine that has that consummate perfect logic of 100% restorability. There's no ability but do or not for that simple and single logic, intrinsic logic. That is what the form we do record all. We do make a map not with a pencil but a computer because it is accurate, which is exactly what we're going to make. Your imagination, initiated, organized, connected, simulated, analyzed, applicated, created, imagined by the connection of the dots informations to be having the maximum logic relevance is made, initiated in the fucking your brain, not the fucking 2D having small pencils and ball pens in the fucking meaningless paper. You can make a 3D. You can make your imagination. The connections are made, not having a scribbling on the fucking paper, but a silent imagination. Everybody thinks that they do know something, which really is not proven. Thinking what they think they do know. Thinking what they think they do know is not the knowledge until it is proven. Having a knowledge, what they think is a knowledge, is not a knowledge. Think there are things as knowledge. 자, 원숭이가 원숭이인 이유는 자기가 원숭이라고 생각하지 않기 때문이기도 하고, 더 깊이로는 자기가 원숭이라고 생각하지 않다는 사실을 조차도 모르기 때문이야. 그러니까 자기가 원숭이일 가능성을 항상 배제하는데 자기가 그것을 배제한다는 사실조차도 모르지. 자기가 무엇을 모르지만 그것을 모른다는 사실조차도 몰라. 자, 원숭이가 무엇을 하는데 그것을 자기가 왜 하는지 모르지. 질문하지 못해. 자기가 무엇을 하지만 그거는 유전자가 하는 거지 너의 뇌가 하는 게 아니지. 너의 뇌가 하는 게 맞지만 네가 하는 건 아니지. 그리고 너는 네가 왜 행동을 하는지 모를 뿐만 아니라 어떤 조건에서 시간과 장소에 특정 환경에서 네가 특정 행동을 하는 것에 대한 이유를 몰라. 왜 하는지 몰라. 물론 온갖 개소리 한다고 해서 문제가 해결되지 않지. 지금 이렇게 아무리 말을 해도 그 어떤 문제도 해결되지 않아. 원숭이는 멍청할 것이고 그래야만 했었어. 원숭이는 자기가 무엇을 안다고 생각하고, 그리고 자기가 무엇을 안다고 생각한다는 사실도 몰라. 그리고 자기가 무엇을 안다고 생각하지만 검증이 안 되는데 그것이 검증이 안 됐다는 사실도 몰라. 그리고 검증이란 게 뭔지도 몰라. 그래서 자기가 무엇을 생각하지만 무엇을 생각하는지 몰라. 그 무엇이 어떻게 관련되는지 생각하지 못하지. 제가 무엇을 안다고 생각하지만 실제로 안다고 생각한다는 사실도 모르고, 무엇을 모르지만 모른다는 사실을 모르고, 검증이란 게 무엇인지 모르고. 문제가 너무 많다고? 해결책은 적어. 또 다른 동물은 더해요. 인간도 졸라 멍청하지만 다른 동물은 자기가 멍청한다는 사실조차 질문도 못해. 아. 결국 인간은 발냄새가 심했고 똥이 차가웠으면서 입냄새가 나지를 않았고, 자기가 무엇을 안다고 생각하지만 안다고 생각한다는 사실을 모르고, 모르지만 모른다는 사실을 모르면서 질문을 할 수가 없지. 문제가 뭔지 모르니까. 의심이 뭔지 몰라. 인식이 없으니까. The computer algorithms that we call artificial neural networks are directly inspired by the hierarchical organization of the human cortex. Like the human cortex, they contain a pyramid of successive layers, each of which attempts to discover deeper regularities than the previous one. Because these consecutive layers organize incoming data in deeper and deeper ways, they are also called deep networks. Each layer by itself is capable of discovering only an extremely simple part of the external reality. Assemble many of these layers, however, and you get an extremely powerful learning device capable of discovering complex structures and adjusting to very diverse problems. Today's artificial neural networks, which take an advantage of the advances in computer chips, are also deep in the sense that they contain dozens of successive layers. These layers become increasingly insightful and capable of identifying abstract properties the further away they are from the sensory input. Now, however seemingly unvalued, tasks could be said to be impossible to
invalid for its organization, to make the network to the logic process, it to make the logic procedure. However, it would be seem to be impossible for its unfathomable magnitude to do so, or what is required to do logic, just execute. Well, the knowledge can be attained, connections can be made, dots to be perceived, simulations can be created without effort as long as its structure is certain, is in concrete basis. The processing is just ensued as a concomitant natural cascade of computing that has no effort except that silent processing. This is the warranty statement and of all related legal disclaimer of Webster's New World College Dictionary by Wiley Publishing Incorporated. Trademarks. Webster's New World. The Webster's New World logo will define your world and related trade dress are trademarks or registered trademarks of John Wiley & Sons Incorporated and or its affiliates in the United States and other countries and may not be used without written permission. All other trademarks that is not written above are the property of their respective owners. Well, this is a very definitive sentence by the real lawyer. Well, it definitely and clearly says all other trademarks are the property of their respective owners means any words, any trademarks written or any provided except those are written above by this publishing company are of their respective belong to their respective owners, which is very astonishing. Except all those ones that are not written above, that are not included above written. Wow. Wiley Publishing Incorporated is not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. This is dictionary. Limit of liability and disclaimer of warranty. While the publisher and author have used their best efforts in preparing this book, they make no representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy or completeness of the contents of this book and specifically disclaim any implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. No warranty may be created or extended by sales representatives or written sales materials. The advice and strategy contained herein may not be suitable for your situation. You should consult with a professional where appropriate. Neither the publisher nor author shall be liable for any loss of property or any other commercial damages, including but not limited to special, incidental, consequential, or other damages. The new and very revolutionary suggestion that Pasteur made was that the yeast that is found in during a colic fermentation and the organic material associated with the production of lactic acid and acetic acid were not lifeless catalysts but were, in reality, living things. He contended that the organic material served as food for these living things and that the products accumulating in their presence were the results of their metabolic processes. Thus, many phenomena that heretofore had been considered purely chemical were, in his view, biological in origin. Pasteur's views for the first time were then hunches of the kind that are formulated with much emphasis in heated discussions. If Pasteur had done nothing more than formulate this just to him by the fact that optically active substances denote the presence of a living agent, his name would not have forgotten its start. Names of so many of the impersonal bright ideas but did nothing to convert them to reality. Fortunately, Pastor was disciplined enough to use his hunches, working up this space on which to build solidly documented experiential structure. The new and very revolutionary suggestion that Pasteur was made that the yeast found during alcoholic fermentation, the organic material associated with the production of lactic acid and acetic acid, were not lifeless catalysts but were in reality living things. He contended that the organic materials served as food for these living things and that the products accumulating in their presence were the results of their metabolic processes. For that, living things and that the products accumulating in their presence were the results of their metabolic processes. For those all organic materials that is eaten as food and the products accumulating in their presence was actually the product that is produced from the living things as the result of their metabolic process. Thus, many phenomena that heretofore had been considered just a purely chemical were, in his view, a biological in origin. Pasteur's views were at first little more than hunches of the kind that were formulated with much emphasis in heated discussions. If Pasteur had done nothing more than formulate ideas suggested to him by the fact that the optically active substance denote the presence of a living agent, his name would now be forgotten as are the names of so many other young persons who had bright ideas but did nothing to convert them into reality. Fortunately, Pasteur was disciplined enough to use his hunches, working up this as a basis on which to build a solid documented experimental structure.
This is Sprachmemos, a voice recording about skim. Yes. Concoct and contrived, amalgamated and adulterated, contaminated and corrupted, degraded and devalued, depreciated and deprecated, divagated, digressed, polluted and poisoned, wakened with wicked mindset that is venomous, by ominous and sinister proc that is having potentially portent possibilities with harbinger ones. It's not to have the deteriorated and sabotaged, vandalized and vitiated, mutilated and besmirched, tarnished and impaired, maimed and crippled ones, not to receive the impeccable and immaculate products. Vile and vitriol, vicious, vice, rapacious, subliminal, under threshold for detecting the bullshit, insinuating insidiously with implying implication, premising and permitting with soft infiltration and penetration, perpetrating for perforation of holes under the detectable sensible area and range, insinuating serpentine in serenity under sedated quiescency. Lip service. Subterfuge and fudge, play and ploy, plot and pilfery, fabricate for confabulation, chicanery and charade that is a parade. The intriguing intrigue, machination and maneuver, conspiracy for plot, also for the plot, mendaciously made and moduled, manipulated, made. Concoction with contrivance, amalgamation, adulteration, that is adultery, deceiving for deceit, the decent conceitedness, pristine clandestine scheme, both viciously and rapaciously, with vicarious and also voraciously, doing rapturously, raptively, ravishing and rivetously, furtively and surreptitiously. The purpose of physics is to know the essence of an object, know the property of interaction, know the structure, analyze the interactions, the movements, all the operations analyzed for its network, for how to operate by what information on structure and make new one.
Now, the genuine creativity is made by that logic from the deeper understanding of informations for ever getting more closer to the essence, for the more core structure from which the creative application is really created. One information exists, but not tens, but hundreds of other applications are made from the dense and diverse connections that are made around of it, from quality and quantity of informations of knowledge that is made possible because the from the fact that the computer as a machine really knows its knowledge for what really it knows, for what really it has. From that accurate storage of knowledge, the computer can mobilize for its all, now literally all knowledges, for making relevance, maximum relevance of logic around all and any informations for all and any organizations. That is the definition of creativity from the accurate storage of knowledge made by from the deepest and objective analyzation of knowledge. From that resource, the utilization of possibilities that are made from the connection around of the organization is made. That is the process of creative application for what really is made from.
The important lessons are acquired from the connection of informations for its tiny and small pieces of informations through that connections. Important lessons on what the informations do really mean in general terms, that the real invaluable lessons are acquired from that execution of connection. Had a lot of time that was spent for learning a certain discipline from reading a book, like having taken 5 years compared to 1 year. You literally squandered the fucking 4 years because of the low quality of the book, which required a lot of other books to read. Okay, the fucking disorganization makes a lot of dissipation. The ability to manipulate vast quantities of information in digital form aids calculation and analysis, but it also reveals through its basic computing to storing and photo to any form of videos, any visual aids, and also the communication. In photography, for example, the detail that could previously only be recorded in a light sensitive photographic emulsion can now be recorded digitally. The resulting picture is a sequence of binary bits. Similarly, sound can be analyzed, stored, and transmitted more accurately in digital form than through earlier mechanical or analog form. A DVD disc can store sound, film, thousands of images, or a multi-volume encyclopedia. All of these things, which are just derivations of the same technology to the specific purpose to meet, experienced very differently, but lies in the same cause of logic, are expressed in exactly the same way.
by a sequence of code. In this case, a binary, just simple code. A sequence of on and off gate switches. The fundamental implication of this would be quite astounding were it not so commonplace now, thanks to technology. Reality is built up through a sequence of pieces of information. Reality is built up through a sequence of pieces of information. Information pieces sequence is the analysis. Everything can be translated to and then reconstructed from as a translator, the most basic of all forms, a sequence of code. Successful learning is possible only if experiences and knowledge are synthesized with new information received in the courses. It means that in the teaching learning process, the student group community is primary, for it is they who play the main role, not the teacher. Students' activity is one of the most significant requirements towards the training. Spontaneous activities created in the group where teamwork and cooperation with others and a constant exchange of information, the shaping of common opinions to develop the ability of group cooperation in the group work. Starting with the experiences of the students participating in training, it is important to analyze and discuss problems together to set up alternatives and give reasons for decisions reached. In this case, the teacher is to help or assist only and should not give solutions as a static answer. To find the possibilities that hasn't yet been created for the application to start from the origin up. It is the simulation for diverse experiments for what has not yet been initiated, for the execution coming out of imagination. It is no creation but the accurate understanding. Education should be basically a proactive manner. You have to make the student responsible for his own development and make it progressively in the teaching process. It is themselves, it is itself that learn from its proactive, its initiative game.
The constant question on the network for progressively, proactively connecting the fucking dots like a progressive application.
기발한 책들을 적같이 많이 읽어야 한다. 엄청나게 훌륭한 책들을, 그 훌륭한 연결점을 만드는 아주 기발한 관점을 기술한 그 책을 적같이 많이 읽어야 한다. 그냥 빨리.
Concoct and contrived, amalgamated and adulterated, contaminated and corrupted, degraded and devalued, depreciated and deprecated, polluted and poisoned, weakened with wicked mindset that is venomous, by ominous and sinister practice, having potentially portent possibilities with harbinger ones. Not to have that deteriorated and sabotaged, vandalized and vitiated, mutilated and besmirched, tarnished and impaired, maimed and crippled ones not to receive impeccable and immaculate parts. Subliminal under threshold for detecting the bullshit, insinuating insidiously with implying implication, premising and permeating with soft infiltration and penetration, perpetrating for perforation of holes under the detectable, sensible area and range, insinuating serpently in serenity under sedated quiescency. Subterfuge and fudge, play and ploy, plot and pilfery, fabricate for confabulation, chicanery and charade that is a parade. The intriguing intrigue, machination for manoeuvre, conspiracy for plot also for the plot, mendaciously made and moduled, manipulated, concoction with contrivance, amalgamation and adulteration that is adultery, deceiving for deceit, the decent conciseness. Pristine clandestine schema, both viciously and rapaciously vicarious and also voraciously doing, rapaciously, rapturously, raptively, ravishing and riotously, furtively and surreptitiously, an overt and covertly, fabulously forged fiction, fictitious and factitious, scam and spam, the artifice and stratagem, tactic, amending, amending, mending with prohibition and polishing, smoothing and grinding and burnishing, varnishing and burnishing and waxing with rubbing and tantalizing tools and methods for the glazing, dressing and buffling and buffing by enameling and also writing and lacquering, specious and plausible, even magnificent with manifestation.
Now, the fluent and flexible combination of words that really, by the logic, define the grammar. The definition of grammar is the structure of words for which one, for what words are deployed in how structures for how. Now, the more diverse combinations the machine can make for deploying diverse and vast words in combinations as much as that diversity, meaning the analyzation is more diverse and more delicate, dense. Well, that's it. That is the definition of grammar, which is the flexible and fluent combination of words, as much as its accurate analyzation. The more accurate, relevant, maximum objective analyzation, so is the code of words. Experimentation is a much more efficient way of obtaining knowledge than passive observation. The proactive simulation, the progressive stimulation, where the computer can find by making difficult situation in different conditions all the new and deep advanced conditions around the structure and process into which can the computer know the need to make other kind of different the suited applications, machines, technologies to address, deal, solve the situation to be created. As all learning is just the attack and defend, construct and destruct of network, all systems are made and demolished. It is the process of evolving that is the definition of simulation, and that is itself by that a process of learning. By creating conditions that are relevant to a specific question, the objective we ensure that the information we obtain is relevant. Sometimes scientists must develop new instruments and apparatus to measure. Our natural survival instinct is to seek comfort in temperatures that keep us around 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 to 22.2 Celsius. By getting outside of this comfort zone and stressing the cellular functioning of the body either by using heat and cold in the same session or focusing on one temperature extreme, we strengthen our physiological systems, we lower our daily breathing rate, improve our muscle tissue, and raise our threshold for handling stress. Raise our threshold for handling stress. Evidence shows that we are at our best physically harder, mentally tougher, and spiritually sounder. After experiencing the same discomforts our early ancestors were exposed to every fucking day. The lack of temperature change caused by indoor lifestyles and misalignment with nature has taken us far from our ancestral upbringing, and it continues to weaken the nervous system by making progressively proactively the stress tests, we become our best physically, mentally, and even spiritually. You have to know some knowledge on the subject that you want to find in the search engine, that in order to find, to know more deeper, broader on the subject you want to know, that you must have some a little uh, informations that you know about. So entering by that word into the search engine, can you extend and deepen the knowledge connected by that? It is about connecting, extending, densifying the network of knowledge, and that by that very logic, you have to know the informations clearly defined. Define clearly the knowledges you do have on this subject in order to, by that basis, what you have, to expand further more from it, knowing your standpoint, your location, your status of learning process, that from that stage of knowledge, can you expand it? So the clear definition, knowing clearly for the states of your learning, for what informations do you know on the subject that you want to find know more from searching.
The saying that originally, theoretically, thus accurately, with no doubt and no exception, the learner one can see for by what one is knowing, to the extent of that boundary, the one can see by the one's knowledge, the one is having, is captured in a study in which researchers wrote up a detailed description of a half inning of baseball and gave it to a group of baseball fanatics and a group of less enthusiastic fans to read. Afterward, they tested how well their subjects could recall the half inning. The baseball fanatics structured their recollections around important game related events, like runners advancing the runs scored. The one almost got the impression they were reading off an internal scorecard. The less enthusiastic fans remembered fewer important facts about the game and were more likely to recount superficial details like the weather. Because they lacked a detailed internal representation of the game, they couldn't process the information they were taking in. They didn't know what was important and what was trivial. They couldn't know what mattered without a conceptual framework in which to embed what they were learning. They were extremely forgetful.
Why, in country after country, the mandated seat belts was it impossible to see the promised reduction in road accident fatalities? John Adams, a professor of geography at University College London, wrote in one of his many essays on risk. It appears that measures that protect drivers from the consequences of bad driving encourage bad driving. The principal effect for what is intended to be for seatbelt legislation has been a shift in the burden of risk from those already best protected in cars to the most vulnerable pedestrians and cyclists outside cars. Adams started to group these counterintuitive findings under the concept of risk compensation, the idea that humans have an inborn tolerance for risk. As safety features are added to vehicles and roads, drivers feel less vulnerable and tend to take more chances to have risks. The phenomenon can be observed in all aspects of our daily lives. Children who wear protective gear during their games have a tendency to take more physical risks, and hikers take more risks when they think a, when they think a rescuer can access them easily.
Despite my early dreams of being a neuroscience pioneer and discovering something that nobody else had ever been thought to look for, the truth is that the vast majority of creative ideas are based on pre-existing notions. These new ideas are different but are often built on the shoulders of previous work. This is especially true in science, where detailed and deep knowledge of all current research is the basis on which new experiments and new research are initiated. But this doesn't make new ideas any less creative. Remember the saying, there is nothing new under the sun. True words and available to remember. Many of the most creative breakthroughs are based on and originated from the more grounding cause, the more essence structure. One of the most famous examples is just the personal computer. Technically didn't invent any of the elements of the personal computer. Xerox did that. What James did was perfect technological tools and packaged them for the home market, which ended up starting an empire. Another famous example, Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb, but he sure did construct 6,000 trials of materials for the filament and perfected it so it could be used commercially. Lifeline infrastructures are vital systems that support a nation's economy and quality of life. Modern economies rely on the ability to move goods, people, and information safely and reliably. Adding to their importance is that many of the lifeline systems serve vital roles in disaster recovery. Consequently, it is of the utmost importance to government, business, and the public at large that the flow of services provided by a nation's infrastructure continues unimpeded in the face of a broad range of natural and technological hazards. The linkage between systems and services is critical to any discussion of infrastructure, although it is the performance of the hardware, an example, the highways, pipes, and transmission lines, that is of immediate concern following an earthquake. It is actually the loss of services that these systems provide that is the real loss to the public. Therefore, a high priority in protecting these systems from hazards is ensuring the maintenance and expansion of lifeline systems. You mobilize the focus of learning into a concentrated purpose for the most important objective as analyzed by its priority. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the most learned and well-rounded persons ever to live. The entire universe, from the wing of a dragonfly to the birth of the earth, was the playground of his curious intelligence. Playground of curious intelligence. Curious playground of curious intelligence. His brilliance, learned and earned, certainly he had an unusual mind and an uncanny ability to see what others didn't say and can't say. But the 6,000 pages of detailed notes and drawings present a clear mind of a diligent, brilliant, curious student, a perpetual learner in laborious pursuit of wisdom, who was constantly exploring, questioning, and testing. Diligent, curious, brilliant. Expanding your mind is vital to being creative. Expanding your mind is vital to being creative. Therefore, invest regularly in learning opportunities. One of the greatest gifts. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the most learned and well-rounded persons ever to live. The entire universe, from the wing of a dragonfly to the birth of the earth, was the playground of his curious intelligence. The playground of his curious intelligence. But did Leonardo have some mystical giftedness as brilliance, learned and earned? Certainly he had an unusual mind and an uncanny ability to see what others didn't see before. The 6,000 pages of detailed notes and drawings present clear mind of a diligent, curious student, a perpetual learner in laborious pursuit of wisdom, who was constantly exploring, questioning, and testing. Expanding your mind is vital to being creative. Therefore, invest regularly in learning opportunities, one of the greatest gifts. Mike.
Journeys are the midwives of thought. Few places are more conducive to internal conversations than a moving plane, ship, or train. There's an almost peculiar correlation between what is in front of our eyes and the thoughts we're able to have in our heads. Large thoughts at times, growing large, views new thoughts as new places, introspective reflections which are liable to stall are helped along by the flow of the landscape. The mind is reluctant to think properly when thinking is all it is supposed to do. Ah, ah, ah! The task can be as paralyzing as having to tell a joke or mimic an accident demand. Thinking improves when parts of the mind are given other tasks, are charged when listening to music or strolling a line of trees.
Most of the words we use and the meanings we think about are a combination of simpler ideas. Consider a chair. Before you can have an idea of a chair, you need to understand that there exist in the world certain functional objects. Some of these objects support human activity, in this case, is sitting. Some of them are specialized for sitting at certain high places, like bar stools. If you learned about a culture in which a certain type of chair was used only for the purpose of sitting while waiting for a bus, you might think this is all, but would have no difficulty understanding it. The combination of the concepts chair and waiting for a bus allows you to create the new complex concept chair used while waiting for a bus, but the basic concept of chair is built out of the simpler ideas that we take for granted. Object, furniture, sitting.
It's a fundamental mistake to imagine that when you see the non-value in a value or the untruth in a truth, the value or the truth of that which ceases to exist. It has only become relative. Everything human is relative because everything rests on inner polarity, where everything is a phenomenon of energy. Energy necessarily depends on the pre-existing polarity without which there could be no energy. There must always be high and low, hot and cold, etc. So that the equilibrating process, which is energy, can take place. Therefore, the tendency to deny all previous values. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to the limits of what can be made, of what is possible, to the thresholds, to push the boundaries for what's possible to make, to create. In a voluntary effort, an effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile, higher than any she has ever built so far. For a sprinter could be trying to beat his own record. For a violinist, measuring on intricate musical passage. For each person, there are thousands of opportunities, challenges to expand ourselves.
It is very important in the information age to understand the difference between knowledge and information. What is accessible by computer and, indeed, what is published in the journals is information. Knowledge is something that has to be proved through the process of communication and communication, found in the real world, outside the library, expressed in every page of the publications, constructed in the mind of the expert reader, and also exist on the internet anytime, anywhere. Haben durch die Prozess von Kommunikationen, die der Simulation, geproven. This is what scholarship is about. Information is, these days, instantly accessible, but knowledge still takes years of dedicated study to acquire. Imagine that a freak accident wiped out an entire field of experts on a subject while all were attending on a conference. How long would it take to reconstruct expertise in the field so that research could once again progress? It would probably take many years despite the fact that research was all published. To take another example, what do producers of science documentaries for television programmers do when they are researching their subjects? They talk to the experts rather than trying to read the journals. Quite rightly, as that is the only place that knowledge is to be found, inside the heads of the scholars.
Compartmentalize, departmentalize, divide those sentences of phrase for each of which are independent from the previous one and to the latter one. All those sentences are independent by using, well, comma, period, slash, or any marks that those are independent from the previous one and the latter one.
All human societies have economic systems within which goods and services are produced, distributed, and consumed. In one sense, the economic aspect of culture is simply the sum of the choices people make regarding these areas of their lives. These choices critically determine much of people's lives. For example, choosing to become a farmer rather than an insurance broker may determine where you live, who you are likely to meet, the sorts of behaviors you will expect in your spouse and offspring, and so on. However, such choices are not unlimited, rather, they are limited by your cultures, traditions, and technologies. Thus, in general, for your knowledge, it always is limited to one's, the learner's knowledge, for what one is knowing and can think about it, and learner's canons, knowing via one's erkenntnisse, jemand erkenntnisse. It is confined, constricted, constrained. Our environment set the boundaries within which choices about the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services are made, to the extent that economic systems are part of culture. People in different cultures have different sorts of economic behavior, to which the way they mobilize to achieve, develop, advance, improve the end goal is just entschiedene, entschiedene, verschiedene. What's dangerous about the internet is because it has the aura, aura of technology around it. It has a totally undeserved instant credibility. The fact that information is conveyed in this high-tech manner somehow adds authority to what is conveyed. No, to what is conveyed is irrelevant to the manner for what manner to convey them. 9. When in fact that the internet is a global conveyor of unfiltered, unedited, uncurated information. It is the greatest tool we have not only for making people smarter and quicker, but also for making people dumb but faster. Rumors published on the internet now have a way of immediately becoming facts. This is particularly true among people who might not themselves have access to the internet, but hear a piece of news, hear a piece of news or gossip from the people around them who do have access. How can we make decisions in the face of scientific uncertainty? The answer is that our plans surely have to be conditional and contextual. Scientific information can help us understand the environmental issues, but the policies we create based on this understanding will always depend on further study and more confirming evidence. An approach currently favored by many natural resource managers is called adaptive management, or learning by doing. In adaptive management, policies are designed from the outset to use scientific principles to examine alternatives and assess outcomes, rather than assume that what seems the best initial policy will option will always remain so. Adaptive management sets up scientific experiments to monitor how conditions are changing and what effects or actions or inactions are having on both the target and non-target elements of the system. The goal of adaptive management is to enable us to live with the unexpected. It aims to yield understanding as much as to produce answers or solutions. He or she is likely to move on rather than ask a follow-up question or probe for related ideas. Any hope of becoming a customer of that idea that is possible to be created by by the person who asks, by whom, is lost. This is a failure in the form of a lost opportunity that can be made, questioned, asked by a innocuously creative one, the curious one. Although direct answers are often needed and well placed, they do not work universally. A skilled explainer learns to see the intent behind a question, for what and how that works from the ground up, and formulate an answer that focuses on groundational understanding from the foundational basis up, instead of the answer of nominal form. Lifeline infrastructures are vital systems that support the nation's economy and quality of life. Modern economies rely on the ability to move goods, people, and information safely and reliably. Adding to their importance is that many of the lifeline systems serve vital roles in disaster recovery. Consequently, it is of the utmost importance to government, business, and the public at large that the flow of services provided by a nation's infrastructure continues unimpeded in the face of a broad range of natural and technological hazards. The linkage between systems and services is critical to any discussion of infrastructure. Although it is the performance of the hardware, an example the highways, pipes, and transmission lines, that is of immediate concern following an earthquake, it is actually the loss of services that these systems provide that is a real loss to the public. Therefore, a high priority in protecting the systems from hazards is ensuring the continuity, or at least the rapid restoration of service. Nowadays, travelers who want a visual record of their vacations take a camera. But before 1900, when George Eastman first introduced the Brownie camera, travelers recorded their impressions of the places they visited in a notebook with ink, pencils, or watercolors. Think of Charles Darwin, who might not have come up with his theory of evolution if it had not been for the thousands of sketches he made of his trip to the Galapagos Islands. The advantage is that sketchbook travelers deeply see the places they visit. They are forced to look with different eyes. Let's take the famous lone cypress tree overlooking Pebble Beach near Carmel, California as an example. Today's camera-carrying tourists generally think, "Oh, that's pretty," and proceed to snap a quick-shot digital photo. But a travel sketcher would take the time to notice its trunk's subtle shading and its shady, lengthening shadow, the yelping panic that just ran circles around it. Nitrogen, in its gaseous form, is often used in situations in which it is important to keep other, more reactive atmospheric gases away. It serves industry as a blanketing gas, for example in protecting materials such as electronic components during production or storage. To prevent the oxidation of wine, wine bottles are often filled with nitrogen after the cork is removed. Nitrogen has recently also been used in blanketing fruit after it has been picked up to protect it from rotting. Apples, for example, can be stored for up to 30 months if they are kept at low temperatures in an atmosphere of nitrogen. In addition to these applications, nitrogen is also used in oil production, which it is pumped in compressed form underground to force oil to surface. Ordinary air cannot be used for this purpose because some of the gases that make up the air would react with the oil, producing undesired byproducts. Some scientists compare the brain to a relay station and merely coordinates incoming signals and outgoing responses, whereas others see it as an immense computer that processes information and then arrives at an appropriate response. Francois Jacob, the French molecular biologist and Nobel laureate, suggests that the human mind is far more. It is a built-in need to create order out of a constant flow of information coming from its sensory organs. In other words, the brain creates a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end, a temporal sequence that makes sense of events. The brain selects and discards information to be used in the narrative, constructing connections and relationships that create a web of meaning. This way, a narrative reveals more than just what happened, it explains why. When the mind selects and orders incoming information into meaning, it is telling itself a story. Okay, it's too long. Second version. For Samsung Probability series.
But the illusion of knowledge led them to confuse the familiarity they had gained from repeated exposure to concepts in the course with an actual understanding of them. As a rule, reading text over and over again yields diminishing returns in actual knowledge, but it increases familiarity and fosters a false sense of understanding. Only by testing ourselves can we actually determine whether or not we really understand. This is one reason why teachers give tests, and why the best tests prove knowledge at a deep level.
Some scientists compare the brain to a relay station that merely coordinates incoming signals and outgoing responses, whereas others see it as an immense computer that processes information and then arrives at an appropriate response. From, say, Francois Jacob, the French molecular biologist and Nobel laureate, suggests that the human mind is far more. It has a built-in need to create order out of the constant flow of information coming from its sensory organs. In other words, the brain creates a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end, a temporal sequence that makes sense of events. The brain selects and discards information to be used in the narrative, constructing connections and relationships that create a web of meaning. This way, a narrative reveals more than just what happened. It explains why. When the mind selects and orders incoming information into meaning, it is telling itself a story. Sometimes all the outcomes customers are trying to achieve in one area have a negative effect on other outcomes. This is very common when companies are busy listening to the voice of the customer. Traveling salespeople, for example, may say they want a smaller cell phone, but they may not have thought about how hard the tiny phone will be to use. Carpenters may request a lightweight circular saw without thinking about the fact that we will no longer have the power to get through some of the more difficult jobs. When customers make requests for new product features, they're usually focused on solving just one problem and are not thinking of how their requested solution will get to make another concomitant ripples affected by that. In this situation, customers request new features but reject the resulting product when they realize ramifications of their suggestions. The added feature turns out to be worthless because of the problems it causes. Albert Einstein talked about what influenced his life as a scientist. He remembered seeing a pocket compass when he was 5 years old and marveling that the needle always pointed north. In the moment, Einstein recalled he felt something deeply hidden behind things. Around the age of 6, Einstein began studying the violin. After several years, he recognized the mathematical structure of music. The violin became a lifelong friend of his. When Einstein was 10, his family enrolled him in the Luitpold Gymnasium, where he developed a suspicion of authority. The trait served Einstein well later in life as a scientist. His habit of skepticism made him easy to question many long-standing scientific assumptions.
Like the modern society, the primitive society has less specialized knowledge to transmit, and since its way of life is enacted before the eyes of all, it has no need to create a separate institution of education such as a school.
But the illusion of knowledge led them to confuse the familiarity they had gained from repeated exposure to the concepts in the course with an actual understanding of them. As a rule, reading text over and over again yields diminishing returns in actual knowledge, but it increases familiarity and fosters a false sense of understanding. Only by testing ourselves can we actually determine whether or not we really understand. That is one reason why teachers give tests and why the best tests probe knowledge at a deep level.